podcast, I believe number 14, sitting here with a contributor to DBLCIN, as well as some people call it Double Sin. Yep. Let me talk again.
Check.
There we go.
Check.
Okay.
There we go.
Cool. Well, thank you for having, the time to come out here and come to the compound. Definitely appreciate it.
Yeah.
For sure. So how did you originally get connected with Double Sin?
So I was going to college for journalism with a focus in magazine journalism. And as a part of one of our classes it was like my final magazine journalism class, I heard about Double Sin through just trying to figure out what Cincinnati hip hop was at the time, because I always listened to hip hop and I was always about the local music scene when I did like metal stuff back in like 2000,
Metal,
2010.
what kind of metal? What bands, for example?
Well, so I'm from Lebanon, Ohio. So there was this band called At the Throne of Judgment, and they were this group that got signed to a label called Rise Records, which also they were in charge of The Devil Wears Prada. So basically, The Devil Wears Prada is making a lot of noise. Like, if you know anything about metal, they were really big at the time. And they had a show that a couple of friends invited me out to with this group called At the Throne of Judgment. They were a local band. I wasn't expecting much, but they were kick-ass. They were super good. And to this day, I'm still putting their album on repeat. And so, like, through that, I started to really like metal music, and I was in a metal band of... a couple of friends started up, and I was like filling in as their vocalist.
Yeah, because I think we didn't even get to cover this, in our little pre-meeting and stuff, the metal stuff, that I was originally really big into progressive rock. So have you ever heard of Dream Theater?
Oh, dude, Dream Theater is like what I
With,
got my music
Mike
started.
Portnoy. That was
my favorite drummer of all time.
That was my first show. Was Dream Theater up in Columbus.
Yeah, dude,
Yeah.
Was it? They did a show up there called like Prague Nation or something like that.
Maybe.
It was a tour.
It was with the Revolt tour or something like that.
Okay.
I don't know, it was a long time ago. Big shout out to Best Buy for the plug.
Yeah.
But my dad used to work at Best Buy, and there was different representatives, and we even got to go to a Rush show one time as well. But
that's legendary.
It was kind of lame, though, to be honest, because they were all on stools playing guitars. They weren't even... Well, I understand you're older, like, no problem, like, don't hurt yourself or anything. But it was like a giant promotion that they had like giant walls of like pigs roasting. It was like a pig roast, all behind them sitting on stools. And you could tell that they were uncomfortable because there's like giant heaters right behind them cooking up like meat and stuff, chickens and people were buying them, of course. But I don't know. I digress about my Rush story. But what happened is I'll tell you what right now, Tom Sawyer. Right? An epic song. They didn't even play it. You know what they did? They played South Park, and how like South Park, the show, did a spoof on Tom Sawyer. Guess what they did? They didn't even play the song on their guitars. What they did was just play the episode from South Park, and then of course, they played along with it. But I didn't know any song from Rush at that time when I was a kid, other than Tom Sawyer and Roundabout, I think it was by Yes, but I'm not really sure. But you know what I'm saying? That it's like I only knew one song, and we finally get to the very end, right? Yeah. Like, all right, like I'm ready. Tom Sawyer, here it is. And it's like, no, it's just like a video of a cartoon. Right. And my soul was crushed. What was your first experience with a concert? And who brought you?
So there was this place in Springboro. It was called Garage 1919, legendary kind of like local metal venue. And it was in this old, I think it used to be like a fire station. So it was just reappropriated for a venue. And I go there, and there was this band that a couple of the kids in my grade were from, and it was called like Desiree or something like that. But also this group called At the Throne of Judgment was playing. And at that time, like I was only listening to Dream Theater. Like that was my introduction to rock. I was listening to them, and I was like kind of hesitant to get into the whole like screamo metal thing. And then I heard At the Throne of Judgment, and they were amazing. And then I started really diving deep into like local metal culture. So I've always had this affinity for local culture because like that's when you see these groups at their hungriest. So when I came to UC and, my music taste had changed quite a bit and I started getting into hip hop, I kind of wanted to get back to those local roots, but I didn't know anything about Cincinnati hip hop at all. So for this magazine writing project, I started to hear about Double Sin because I'm starting to look into local hip hop, and I noticed that, just through my knowledge of Cincinnati journalism, there isn't much that focuses on hip hop. There was City Beat, and they're covering. They're the premier kind of group for covering.
Tell me a little bit more about City Beat. I don't really know much about them.
See, honestly, my knowledge of City Beat and how they function isn't, up to
Pretty
chops
limited.
with it. Yeah, but
Because I know that guy that I worked with, Frank Oglesby from, I think it was Inner City Local Brands and Apparel. He had a shop right next to City Beat, and I got to meet some of their representatives. But what have you seen of them? Are they in a lot of different stores?
yeah, I mean, City Beat's everywhere.
Really?
I think
What do they cover?
they do news coverage, kind of locally and politically, but what most of the people I know when they talk about City Beat, they're talking about their arts and entertainment. And they have like their own kind of like awards as far as music goes, and they try to cover all the genres. But hip hop, you just notice that their coverage of it isn't with as much heart as it could
Really?
be. And
The shot across the bow.
and that's the thing. Like, not to promote too much, but Double Sin did just get noticed by them as being the best local hip hop publication. So that's kind of cool that they're recognizing that not even they have.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Good job.
exactly. Well, certainly.
Yeah. And what is your role as editor, like as far as all the journalism is concerned? Because I know that's a really big deal with you.
So yeah, I'm managing editor. So basically, we have contributing writers that fluctuate each issue that go out. Some want to write for us for a long time. Some just do it. I know this guy, I have this access, and we work with them. A lot of the people may not necessarily have education in writing or anything like that. They're not a professional writer, but they have the passion, they have the access, and that's all we're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So they go out and they interview these people, and they'll bring their projects back to me, and I look through it. I edit for grammatical things first, just to make sure it's like up to par. But we also have a tone that we, kind of assert with Double Sin.
Talk about tone a little bit.
We just want to be as
Like in layman's term, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, I did go to college. I did take a couple English classes and stuff, and ethos and tone, and just this is an opportunity to really be a long form conversation. Like I said, that a lot of people get stuck in talking so quickly, trying to get all the information out. But with a podcast, it is pretty long form, and obviously, we don't have that much time. But, if you could go into that, a little bit from your more educational background, which, we'll also cover as an educator for an organization. And I think that that's really something that you can speak on. Yeah. Like, how do you define tone?
So tone, I mean, it's like a malleable thing, which I mean, it's like Play-Doh. Whichever publication you're going to go to, they're going to have a completely different tone, and that's going to affect all the way down to the way that you ask questions to the person that you're interviewing. So what we want to do at Double Sin is really, while being the authority on like local hip hop, we also want to be as honest and genuine as possible.
Yeah.
We want, when people read our interviews, it comes across as almost a casual conversation. This person just may, have a knack for putting language to sound and things like that, and really getting kind of the humanization of the artist onto the page. So you're not just reading something like, oh, here's this new artist coming through, they're dropping this song, the song's pretty cool, it's like heavy, or it's a good trap song. Like, I want to...
An in-depth dive.
Yeah, exactly. We want to get, kind of more of deeper cuts into what the song is talking about.
Yeah, and I think that's a big opportunity with this podcast. And now I'm talking to you about potentially, underwriting and developing your guys' own podcast, because I think that not only on paper, and as you said, like, it is the 21st century, let's not lie. Not a lot of people are writing pages and pages worth of content.
Exactly.
But if you were to be able to have these exact same conversations, but in a podcast format, you could not only get your message out, but also, display the artists in a different light. And I think that this is the platform for that, right? That I've told you this, Trevor really, doesn't want me to be the face of this, and I've built this up. I've, been able to have a lot of great conversations and got a lot of great relationships too.
Yeah.
And that I wanted to use this as a place to introduce the artists in Cincinnati to the rest of my, network, right? And as, almost like a resume builder, that if I'm talking about Monty C. Benjamin or if I'm talking about Santino Corleone, that I want to be able to send someone an EPK, a little bit of a electronic, press where, a lot of artists have given me a hard time. I don't know if you've gone through this, but where you've already shot something for them for free. And then, you're at another event and you're shooting stuff for other people. And they had expected you to continue shooting for them. But it's like, well, I've already shot something for you.
Right.
I already have your article. I already have your, work. And that, have you ever experienced that with something where, you started working with an artist, but then they just want to kind of stick around rather than move on?
Yeah, see, I don't know if it's that specific. Mainly the thing that...
Because I know it's kind of controversial. I know.
Mainly the thing that we've come into, at least from my standpoint, is I'll just have people just be like, hey, I'm dropping a mixtape. Can you do something about me? Can you do something about my album I'm dropping? And it's like, everybody can record music now. Like, if you're going to reach out to me and you want us to dedicate, literal money to this is real estate we're filling on a piece of paper that we have to publish, and we have to publish in bulk.
And pay for.
Yeah, exactly.
Up front.
Yeah, most certainly. Like, at that point, I want to... You can't just tell me you're releasing an album. And sometimes people get confused on that and might get frustrated. They might think that I don't like their music, or I'm not...
Well, let's talk about that subject, because I've also been dealing with this as well. That you guys probably get tons of submissions, and you may be listening to something and you're like,
yeah, exactly.
Well, how do you guys go about that? Do you just not reply?
Well, see, the thing is like I don't not reply, but I'm not going to promise anybody anything. So if somebody comes to me and they just tell me to do a piece on them, I'm not just going to be like, yeah, we'll do a piece on you. I haven't even listened to your music yet. I don't listen to their music before I start doing a piece on them, because they have to stand out to me. Either I have to find
them. From a personality standpoint as well.
I have to either find them personally, and like that's the way that I prefer to do it, is if somebody reaches out to me, just inherently, I'm a little bit less likely. But if there's somebody who, gives me this EPK and it has like all of this information to who they are as far as their brand, in quotations, or their messages, I'm a lot more likely to, do some more research into it.
Take them more seriously.
And if somebody doesn't do that to me, then I'm going to articulate that to them. I'm going to be like, yeah, that's cool that you're releasing, a mixtape, but why should I cover you? Like, and I'll even, you got to be honest. Be like, everybody's releasing music. Why should I cover you? 9 times out of 10, the person isn't going to respond. And at that point, I'm just like, you obviously...
Yeah, and you're saying it from a positive perspective, that you're trying to help them and say, hey, we could help you create that story. But, it doesn't mean that we want to shut you down. So what I want to ask, and to kind of pivot a little bit to, your role with, as an educator, do you teach those students how to develop those EPKs and how to develop those relationships when, they're talking to different companies?
So, yeah, most certainly. When I work with the Cincinnati Music Accelerator...
give them a little bit of a brief overview. And also, if you wanted to, you could also look into that camera, give a brief little introduction to who you are, and then slap it for us, so then I have somewhere to sync the audio.
All right, so I'm...
you can bring it up a little bit.
I'm Jimmy Dollard. Read it right there. I'm managing editor of Double Sin Magazine, and I am also an press educator for the Cincinnati Music Accelerator.
Cool.
So,
and then just for insurance, I like doing this.
Okay. But so I met Kick Lee and he is a person who started up the Cincinnati Music Accelerator. It's a nonprofit organization, and basically we take musicians who want to make a career out of their music or art or whatever it may be, and we teach them the business aspect, the business side of everything.
Yeah, I'm very interested in that. That's why you're here.
Yeah, because when it comes to a career and that stuff, like, creativity isn't what, pushes you to the forefront. It's not a meritocracy.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, I'm the best at this, I'm going to get a career out of it. No, you got to know how to carry
Hustle.
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why we like Monty C so much, is because just his sheer hustle.
Exactly.
And it's gotten to him where he's at. So, big shout out to artists that do that hustle.
No, most certainly. And we try to give people the savvy. So when they do go into a meeting with an investor, when they do go into an interview, they know how to hold themselves, they know how to project themselves. And we just want to put an end to the starving artist, is what, Kick and a number of the educators have articulated it as. Because a lot of the times you see these people going into contracts that they don't understand, and then they get frustrated, a year into it, and it ends up being a short-lived career. And we want people to go to the table knowing everything that they can, and the things that they're not good at, they can then reach out to other people, be it through the accelerator or, other groups that they have made connections with, and they can best set themselves up for a career in music.
And my dad always said, work your strengths and hire your weaknesses.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way to put it.
Exactly.
Yeah, most certainly. So basically what I do with my students in my class, I teach them press and media. And I'm not going to be a personal, PR agent for anybody.
Well,
but
are you sure?
Yeah. It is a lot more profitable, but just to kind of, keep things legitimate as possible.
Oh yeah, ethical. Yeah, because that's a big conversation, and I don't know how much you want to get into it, but ethics.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to journalism.
No, more on that kind of gray line in a little bit, but
back to the school.
Yeah, I teach students, first off, we don't make an EPK for them, but I tell them the importance of something like that, all the way down to how you need to organize it, what information you want to include. But at the same time, when the students come to my class, I have them do an assignment. And it's basically what we do as journalists when we're speaking to editors, where you have these story meetings and you type up maybe like a 5-sentence paragraph, and you pitch your story to the editor, and you're sitting at a huge table of all the writers and the main editor. And you're writing 5 sentences for a story that could possibly be, roughly like 2,500 words. So you have to be as concise and as enticing as possible within a short time frame. And basically, I have my students do that. I tell them, all right, think of a local artist in the area that not a lot of people know about, the more underground, the better, and write up a 5-sentence kind of like, pitch paragraph.
Wow.
And come to me, and then you're going to pitch them to me. And then as they're going through their pitch, I start telling them, be like, okay, so you want to cover this rapper, you want to cover this artist, do they have a project coming out soon? Okay, that's cool. So there's kind of like a timeliness to it. What is their message? Why should we cover that project? Is this person really big on, civil rights, and their music speaks to that? Are they a person who speaks at public events? Are they going to have a specific event that's tailored to their message as well as the release of their album?
Yeah.
Do they have an interesting story?
Wow.
So I try to teach the students how to fit that into 5 sentences.
Wow.
So right there, I'm teaching students what reporters have to do to get something cleared by their editor, which is what gets you into the magazine, which gets you onto the website. So right there, the students are learning immediately how to position themselves to make it easiest on the reporter, because a reporter is going to get a bunch of people being like, you should do a story on me.
I love that we have this podcast, because it's something where rather than me having to sit over there and write down notes, I can just rewatch the podcast, and so can all of you.
Exactly.
And that is so much, juice, and free game. That anybody on this podcast, that's the content. And that's why I think that, you would be such a great host on a podcast, just due to the fact of, being able to share this knowledge in a more easily distributed way.
Yeah, just to make it a little bit more like digestible and
Yeah.
casual. It's not,
Yeah.
so contrived.
Well, and also like viewership wise, like at
Yeah.
your school, like there's, a limited amount of space. You have a limited amount of time. But if
Exactly.
you could sit on a podcast with 6 students or 10 students on a table and you have class while you're on a podcast, and then you could look back at the class that you previously had, and since it was public, you would want to be respectful of each other, right? So that could be a way to control classrooms.
Yeah, exactly.
Think about that. That because it would all be live, it would all be public, and it would be a way to promote all the students. And obviously, everybody would have to agree to it. But think about that concept.
No, yeah, and there are certainly a lot of
A
ways.
podcast school.
Yeah, and
Where like people are just like in class on a podcast.
yeah, so there are a lot of ways to, kind of try to.
Wow. What do you think about
put these
that, man?
projects in there.
What
No,
do you think
yeah.
about that?
I think there are ways to certainly incorporate something like that. It's just
What future events and vision do you have for that school in addition to DBLCIN? Double Sin.
double sin. Yeah. I mean, right now, as far as the relationship between the two go, it's a nice opportunity for me to see people coming up in the area who are serious about the craft.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, I mean, relationship aside, and there's not really one that exists on paper. But for me, as an editor, I can look at the Music Accelerator and see these students going through, and immediately these are people who take their careers very seriously. They're putting in, the money to sign up for the classes. They're going through the homework assignments. They're meeting with the educators individually to have these kind of little, ideas and things like that. So as an editor, I'm seeing these people who are taking their career seriously. So it's almost a weeding out process right there. It's not obviously the only source that I look through, but at the same time, it right there is a connection between the two. And I think as far as future visions with CMA is. It's almost limitless as long as we kind of contain what its potential is and don't try to put our
And I know you don't want to speak for him.
yeah
Kick, right? But can you speak on the founder whatsoever? Just to kind of give a little bit of an overview of him.
Yeah,
Obviously, I want him to speak for himself, but
yeah, I can just give my perspective of him. So to tail back to what we
how
were
you
first
met,
talking about.
yeah, with your college paper.
Yeah, so we were doing this college paper, and I was doing this project on Double Sin, and I reached out to Robbie C., who's like this legendary graphic creator in the hip hop community, and he started out Double Sin. And I reached out to him, and I'm like, hey man, I would love to do a long form 10-page paper on you guys, like real deal, get into the depths of it, but at the same time, I want to kind of get an idea of what Cincinnati hip hop is today, because it's not really well chronicled. And when you try to look at public media outlets, there's not a lot of coverage on them to begin with. So I expressed that to him, and he was really on board with the idea. And he was like, do you need help, linking up with any of the artists? And I was like, yeah, I mean, I literally know none of them. I know Lantana, of course, because, he was kind of the one who just most recently peaked and was rising above just the locality. And he was like,
so what time period was this?
This was, I mean, it was well after All Hustle No Luck came out.
I'm talking about year-wise.
Yeah, I'm thinking it was 2016. No, it was 2017. It was last year. So he hooks me up with all these artists, Lantana, Haram, and one of them was Kickley. And I talked to Kickley, and at first I went in just knowing that he was a producer. And throughout our interview, I started to get the idea that he was really big on community, really big on the culture, and really big on helping Cincinnati creating a sustaining music scene, basically monetizing.
Yeah,
themselves.
rather than people developing their career and then leaving.
Yeah, exactly, or leaving to develop their career.
Yeah.
It seems like that's what everybody had to do. So, and this was back in, I would say, May of 2017. He's floating kind of these vestiges of an idea of the Music Accelerator. He's talking about the Cincy Music Census and all these things he's currently involved in that are facilitating the direction of the Music Accelerator. And I saw the amount of dedication and just, background work that he was putting into this music accelerator. And I was like, this sounds really cool. I've never heard, like, you hear of tech incubators and things like that, but you don't hear of like a brand accelerator specifically from a musician's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was a really cool idea. So I just kind of kept tabs on it throughout the year. And then I'd say probably around, I think it was August, is when they really like launched themselves to the public and started doing their first semester. I, after Robbie C left Double Sin, got involved because Matt reached out to me because I have journalism experience and he wanted to have somebody to kind of like, manage that end of it. And that's what I do as managing editor. And I had always had in the back of my mind, I was like, I really want to do a story on the Music Accelerator. And at the time, I was also doing an internship for Cincinnati Magazine, and I was trying so hard to pitch a story to them about it. But they weren't necessarily biting because it hadn't started yet. So by the time I'm with Double Sin, the Music Accelerator's starting. And I told Kickley, I was like, hey, man, I really appreciate and like the project that you're about to do. I would love to come into each class and do a weekly write-up of what these students are going through. I'd like to interview the students, the educators, and just kind of chronicle from start to beginning your first class to see how the students have grown, where where they learned, because each student is going to learn something different.
What did you learn from that?
Honestly,
it needs its own podcast.
I just felt like most of the time I was in those classes, normally I'm scribbling down notes to remind me of a specific visual thing that I can write about later. A lot of the times I was writing down notes like, oh, shoot, this is how I can brand myself. This is how I can, set up bank accounts and all this stuff. Like very, like it was
A lesson
solid
plan,
information.
like were you just basically writing up their lesson plan?
Yeah, basically, like I was applying it to myself, and then secondary, I was like, oh shoot, I'm here to interview these people as well.
So you're saying you were robbing them?
Yeah, essentially. But so I'm doing this coverage of them, and a lot of people are liking the stories. And then Kick approached me later, and he was like, hey man, I've heard a lot of good feedback on the press that you put through Double Sin. I would love to get you in as an educator for the program. And we were talking about it at first, but I held off because I was like, I am doing coverage of you guys right now. Once we're done with this cycle, let's talk about it. I just don't want to, cross any ethical boundaries.
Yeah.
So after the first class ended, he approached me again, and we talked about a class to teach students on how to deal with the media, kind of like I was talking before. And through that, I've just developed a really good relationship with somebody who I feel is honestly, through just observation, a mentor to me in terms of how to manage these ideas that you have. Because I've always felt like I have all these ideas in the world, but I've never known how to execute them. And Kick is a very good, calm, collective person who is more than willing to help and more than willing to invest himself into the community just for not for any personal gain. Yeah, exactly. There's nothing, under the table that's happening to benefit him. It helps him indirectly, but it's not like he's trying to screw anybody over.
And that's why we would like to help out as much as we can, so we could monetize different things. Mm-hmm. And whether or not that's like some sort of seminar series, right, or the podcast, or more classes, mm-hmm, or more focused, opportunities. Like for example, the podcast, where those are little additional streams of revenue for other classes. So, not only are they going to be paying for the lawyer, the accountant, or the journalism guy, but also, the podcast session, or the photography session, or the, merchandise, design,
And see, that's the great thing about Kickman. Like he has like all those fronts covered, and that's the thing. Like, and that's why I say I don't want to speak for him. Because he has his own connections. He's been in this scene for a minute, and he has just about, if he can't do it himself, he is always willing to be like, all right, well, I'm going to point you in the direction of this person because I've worked with them personally. I know that they can put out, a good version of whatever service that you're seeking.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I mean, Kick as a guy is just somebody who's found a way to monetize his own avenue. He does a lot of like producing, commercializing his music. He'll sell his music to like commercials and stuff like that, or he'll do stuff with artists. And I've always seen people kind of carry themselves and, sometimes even make money with that kind of like career path, but not as collectivized and organized as Kick does.
Yeah, and I think I could learn a lot from that because that's basically the same sort of infrastructure that we've been trying to develop as well. So we're really looking forward to speaking with you guys more, and I really appreciate you coming out, man. I know you wanted to be out of here around 4:00 or so, and
good.
we're edging up against 4:20. You know what that means. So yeah, man. Well, definitely appreciate you coming out.
No, most certainly.
As far as when the podcast comes out, I have like a load of them. I think on my YouTube, I'm at like podcast number 3.
Okay.
And this is currently podcast number 14.
Right.
So there's definitely some editing that needs to be done. But, it definitely is experience, for us and, to get to use the equipment and see, maybe how you could visualize your own show.
Exactly.
So definitely that's something we're interested to talk to you about. And, definitely, then kind of give a little outro, snap yourself out.
Oh, yeah. Jimmy Dollard, James Dollard, managing editor of Double Sin, DBL, CIN, press educator of the Cincinnati Music Accelerator.
You hear that, Matt?
And honestly, just observer of Cincinnati hip hop. That's what I am. All right.